and you're falling over something that was so avoidable. And this is the point. The first time you try this, it has to go well. Because if it doesn't, one of you is going to be like, we are never doing that again.
So many people think that they could never work with their partner, and that is what this episode of Chats with Ben is all about. We are going to talk about how to successfully run a business with your other half, what makes it a success, how to not fall out, how to make sure you're on the same team, and we're going to share all of our lessons from working together for about 12 years. This is one of the most common questions we are asked, and we go very deep on this subject to bring out our frameworks, our methods for success, and also uncover some of the challenges that we have had and how we have got over them. If you are thinking you could never work with your partner, if you're thinking about doing it, or maybe you already do it and you just want to get better at it, this episode is for you. I think you're going to really enjoy it, and I would love to hear your thoughts after you've watched it. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, enjoy the episode.
I actually think this is the question we get asked the most when someone realizes that we work together. And it's like, oh my God, how do you work with your partner? And it's usually followed up with a statement along the lines of, I could never work with my partner. And they're clearly scarred from some previous experience having worked together on something. And I think there's a real intrigue there. And it's not with just people that we've met like in the last 20 seconds and they've just found out about us. It's people that we actually know as well, that have spent some time with us, and they're kind of interested in that aspect. And I think it's because on some level, it feels like the holy grail almost, if you could potentially work with your partner on the same thing. And especially given that we're kind of in this new age of being able to work remotely and we can make magic internet money, it is so feasible that you could work with your partner. It would be so great if we could do that. But I guess for a lot of people, they've tried it, it doesn't work. And I think that's why it's useful for us to like talk through our experience, how it ended up happening, how we've worked together, the pros, of which there are many, and like maybe some of the cons and some of the challenges, and how that can potentially, they could be worked through, I guess. So I guess you could maybe explain how we came to work together, how long we've worked together, and then we could maybe talk about the benefits of it.
So we've been together since we were 18. The first 3 months of our relationship was just a kind of hanging out over summer. Then what followed was a year of being long distance. And when I say long distance, it was like a 90-minute train journey, which isn't that long, but it's still, they're not there. It's still a distance. And then after that was when we started living in the same city, and then we've lived in the same city ever since. But the two of those first few years, we were just at university, so we very much had like separate like job type, like we did separate work. And then what happened after uni? So you were still in your third year, I was doing 2 full-time jobs, and then I started a business. And then when you left university, you didn't go straight into like my business or any business. You kind of were figuring out what to do, and that's when you started doing modeling, doing TV modeling, and also doing personal training. And so we were in a stage at some point then where I had started a business, a social media, I guess I wouldn't even have called it an agency at the time. I would have kind of said I'm a social media manager, and I was doing work for a number of different clients. You were mainly going down to London to do castings, to get booked on jobs, to then do regular work, often in London, sometimes overseas. And it wasn't actually until a few years into that kind of journey that we started working together. And I think the main catalyst for it was that we had started to realize that my work could be location independent and your work could probably not be location independent. And maybe that was around the time we read the 4-Hour Work Week. Maybe that was the time when we started figuring out we both wanted to travel. And then, so I had my social media agency, had just started hiring people, and I remember a few times distinctly where I had just too much work to do. And I said to you, hey, help me with this. And you were like, well, I don't know how to do it. And I was like, well, just do this, and kind of showed you how to do some stuff. So it was more like Ben got involved in my business to help with overflow, I guess, at first. And then there was probably a period of realizing that it was making less and less sense for you to go down to London, do castings, do modeling jobs. And it was making more sense for us to just combine forces on this business, on this social media agency that we could have together. And then at the time you were geeking out on SEO, like the stuff that would grow the business, really. And then it made a lot of sense for you to grow it and us to join forces there.
Yes, I think, that's pretty much how I got involved. I think that it was a point in my modeling career when I was like, oh, I should actually just live in London, because going to London on the train from Birmingham to do a casting to maybe get a job was just turning into such a burden, such a waste of time. And I was like, right, to take my career to the next level, I need to go to London. But this was literally just after you'd hired someone and we'd got an office. So that really wasn't on the cards. And I think what you were doing, you could sense the kind of scalability of it and that it was interesting. And I'd actually just gone on a modeling job with a guy who was 75 years old, and he was still going to castings, probably traveling just as far as I was. And I thought, wow, this is just like a kind of treadmill of castings and going for work. And I just don't want to do that indefinitely. So I think the decision to actually start working together, it was kind of accidental. I started doing the overflow work, and then we were actually paying a guy to do some Google ads for us. And the way that the social media agency was getting clients was primarily through search, through SEO and pay-per-click. And I kind of understood, or started to understand, how those two processes worked. So it basically saved the agency money because we didn't have to outsource that any longer. And they're kind of things in my kind of wheelhouse. There's some kind of theory involved, just some data, attention to detail, and just...
But you're just a model. How do you know about all this stuff?
I know. I had to fill my brain with valuable information, and it was content creation, which I was good at. It's also quite it's time intensive, but it's figuring out. It's like a puzzle. It's like a challenge, and I think, looking back now, actually, this was the first sign of why we could maybe work together successfully, because it was actually the kind of work that you would hate doing. It's really minor. It doesn't seem like there's a definite payoff. There's a lot of scrolling through articles, learning stuff, and figuring something out, which I'm really into. And it's just like, nah, I don't want to do this at all. So already, I guess, in that those early stages, we realized we had maybe got compatible skill sets and interests.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was giving you work where I really wanted to do it all. It was like, oh, we're already outsourcing this. And then when it was you, it made a lot more sense. I'm trying to think if there was like a moment, and maybe there was a kind of moment when we thought this makes loads more sense. And I think it was probably partly when we booked our first trip that was 5 weeks long to Australia, January 2015. I think it was partly because I was running the agency, had some team members, could see the potential, could see it growing. So maybe when you were just away, I was like calling you, being excited about it. And I definitely remember one moment when you had gone to a casting in London and you called me and you were like, oh, I just went to this casting. They told me they were only seeing me and a few other guys. And I was in this room and there's 30 men there and we all look unbelievably similar. And it's like, how are they going to choose? They're just going to, it's just luck. And then maybe there was a sense that we were controlling our destiny with the agency and with that business. And then with the modeling, it was just all a little bit not like there was more to it than that. There was more unknown than that.
Yes.
But yeah, the kind of complementary skills probably played a part at the very start.
But I think now we're talking about it, something that I can feel is like, some guys might be thinking, wow, but I wouldn't want to work for my wife or work for my partner. But I never felt like that. And I think there's two things. Firstly, this is something we'll come back to, is like, it's that same team mentality. Like, your success is my success. So I'm working towards something for the benefit of us both. But I also felt like I had quite a lot of ownership over the SEO and the PPC stuff, because it was like, well, Jodie's not going to do it, and I can just be master of my own time, and I can make a difference here the way I want to. So I never felt like I was being bossed around. I never felt like, you were in charge, and you'd always got other options. Like if I was crap at it, you could have just been like, no, Ben, that's plenty. Like, well, let's just pay a professional to do this. But I think it took a lot of maybe trust on your part as well, that I wasn't an idiot, and that I was going to be able to kind of master this and ultimately be beneficial. But there was absolutely no part of me that felt like, oh, I'm going to work for my wife. I very much felt like we were working together, and you had your part of the business and I had my part of the business that I was in charge of.
Do you think that's down to you fundamentally not really having an ego and not being bothered about that kind of stuff anyway? Like if anyone had been like, oh, you're joining your girlfriend's business, like, I don't know, yeah, it wasn't even a thing. But also, would you even care if someone did say that?
No, I wouldn't care. I absolutely wouldn't care. But I don't think anyone would say that to me.
No.
But
there's that. There's the ego thing.
There's an ego. I do have an ego, though. I do have an ego, but I just don't think that would have dented it. I think I'd have been like, yeah, I'm sick at this SEO thing. Like, yeah, my wife's doing all the easy stuff, and I'm doing like the really complicated stuff. So yeah. I don't know. I think there's ways of framing it where it doesn't have to hurt your ego. And like it was your name above the door, and I was like, that's. I don't mind. And maybe even though like I'd like to think I'm okay in front of camera, and like, I did the whole modeling thing and the front of house, like the outward facing thing, I was very happy to work kind of behind the scenes, and I didn't have to be, no one had to know really I was part of the business.
But then it's also, so the ego thing is one, but then I think the sense of ownership is kind of interesting, because when like the first role you took over was the guy, Jez, who was doing our Google ads. And then, so if he hadn't been delivering, I would have been like, Jez, what's going on? And there would have been an accountability discussion. But we've never had one of those. But maybe it's just because I just had this big sense of trust that you would just put the work in, figure it out, apply your brain to the problem, and then get the results. And if you didn't get the results, it was never like, oh, Ben, what are you doing? Yes,
I think we should come back to this. I think this is a bigger point.
Yeah.
So I think let's get everyone up to speed on like the relationship. Yeah. So we got to the point where I was kind of embedded within the agency, working on different things. I then went on to train some of the employees in the company on pay-per-click Google ads. So I basically managed myself out of the business ultimately. So when we came to sell, I wasn't actually part of the business. I'd moved away from the business for that reason. So it was kind of less reliant on me. And so we had three guys who were running Google ads, and they were doing a great job. So that was useful that we could do that. And I was also doing the SEO for our company and some consultancy stuff. But then I came away from the business. We ultimately sold that business. And then we had this summer of ideation, thinking about like the next project. And I was totally happy to just be retired and not do anything. And Jodie was like, no, we need to start a new business. So we compromised, and we eventually started a new business. And it was a software business. We had a major pivot in that software business, and ultimately we are still together, and we still have a business, and it's a growing business. And I think that we generally work very well together, and we don't fall out about work much at all. I mean, we don't fall out much, full stop, but work is actually not like, that's one of the things that we really don't fall out on. So are there any other, I've gone over that timeline very, very quickly, but I guess ultimately we started working together in 2013, 14. And so we're kind of 12 years working together.
Yeah.
And I think our working relationship is probably as good now as it has ever been.
Yeah.
So if there's anything else in the timeline that I've missed out, or any details you think we should fill in?
So I think the key points of it are that the first business was definitely one where I started it and then you joined when it made a lot of sense to. I think that a big point to put a pin in it was just the fact that we played very different roles in that business. There was a behind the scenes, there was a in front of the kind of outward facing business owner type role. But this business is one that we started together. So we run CoachRocks together. You're head of product, I'm head of people. And we would call ourselves co-founders, although we tend to say me founder, but that's more a marketing thing. And then, but we also travel together, train together and the business, and run the business like as part of just our normal lives. And then we probably get asked, it must be weekly, what's it like running a business with
100%.
your other half? But equally, I've also run a business with my mom. You've run a business with your mother-in-law. So, and then we've also worked with our best friends. So it's not like we're really not strangers to having close relationships that also become work relationships. So this is the most intense one, I would say, but there's definitely been others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think briefly, and I don't think we need to kind of go over this loads, but like, why is it so good to be able to work together?
Are you asking me?
Well, I thought you could continue, or you could start.
Yeah. Why is it so good? I think it's so good. So the opposite is we have different things that we're working on. We're kind of in the same direction, lifestyle-wise, but we're not in the same direction business-wise. I feel like you could very easily be almost like passing like ships in the night, where you don't really, you're kind of doing your thing, they're doing their thing, you sometimes align and you sometimes don't, but you just, both your careers take priority to you individually, and then you kind of, maybe you come together and talk about it, maybe you don't. Like, we know couples who actually don't even know what the other person does. Maybe one of them's got a job, the other's got another job, and they just don't talk about it. They talk about other stuff. But I feel like that might be difficult, like the real flip side of it, because then how do you know whose career is more important? How do you know which task is more important? If someone needs to go on a business trip on this day, but then the other person, like, how do you, just all of those decisions, I feel like it would actually be loads harder the other way around. So partly why I think it's so good that we do it and have been able to do it is that full alignment that then simplifies everything else, because we both have the business goal of where we want to get to, and then we both have our own different ways of getting to it. And it's really freaking obvious what we each should be doing to get towards said goal. And then I think it means also that we decide, it's not like your business versus my business. It's like, here's our business together, here's our training, here's our traveling, but there's just fewer things to juggle. I actually think it's easier running a business with your partner than not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't have it any other way, right? And we meet couples, there are other couples that do this, they work together and they're like-minded in that sense, that actually once you work together successfully, you can't imagine not working together, because you are working together on something towards a shared goal. And your vehicle is the same. And hopefully if you have a good relationship with your partner, you do have many shared values. And we're lucky because, we got together when we were young, and I think our values have kind of aligned themselves with one another's. So hopefully you have strong values alignment. And I think goals can vary, kind of personal goals for, level of wealth, and goals for lifestyle can vary a little bit. But if you're not working on the same thing, the vehicles for achieving that are different. And if those don't align in terms of when you can take a break and when you can go on holiday, or when something can be super stressful, working hours, when can you go to the gym or go out or whatever, that's really, I imagine, hard to manage. Whereas when you're working on the same thing, the same vehicle to achieve those goals that align with your values, it's much easier together to prioritize, right? This is important. This is when we can take some time off, right? This is going to be a really busy period. We need to be locked in here and dialed in and get this right. And I also think when there are challenges and things are stressful, like you said before, like whose business is more important? If you're working on two different things, two different businesses, or you have two different jobs, it's like, well, don't trouble me with your shit. Like, I've got my own shit to deal with.
You know what? It would actually work out being just who earned the most.
Like who the breadwinner is, I guess. Yeah, I think so.
If we had separate jobs or separate businesses, it would be like, well, mine earns double what yours does, so therefore we're going to just work on mine more, and yours can be like a side project. Yeah. That would be kind of interesting.
Yes, and I also think that ties into another benefit, is that there's no real interpersonal competition.
Yeah.
Because we know we're on the same business, and then anyone's success is the business's success, right? But if you I mean, I bet this happens loads where you have people that come together and one person's earning more than the other. And over time, that balance might shift. And those roles between the relationship has changed. And where there may have been some kind of financial dependency one way or the other, that's actually swapped. And I think that could be really, really challenging. And obviously we don't have loads of experience on that, so we're not going to kind of go into those things. But I do feel like we have virtually no sense of competition with each other in business. And I know that there are people that we know we've spoken to, and especially when they meet maybe later in life and they've both got their own businesses, there is very much a competition over who can be more successful. And that could be money, it could be influence, it could be social media following. And there is a little bit of competition. And even when they've started, like, I guess, collaborative businesses or done something together, there's still a little bit of like, well, who's in charge? Who's doing the work? Who's bringing the money in?
I think we had that before we had a business together, though, because I'm just remembering when we first moved in together. Actually, that was quite funny, because when we first moved in together, we started putting the food bill on the joint account, and I was like, where is all my money going? And it was going on keeping you fed. But then after that, if you remember, there was a year when you were working as a bouncer, and I think you were earning like a kind of hourly rate that was like double what anyone else was earning, because it's like dangerous and that. And then there was the next year when I was working 2 full-time jobs. So we've kind of gone up and down with who's earning more at any given time. But when you were a bouncer, it was just like, oh, I just put more in the joint account now. And then when I was doing my jobs, it was like, oh, I'll just put more in the joint account now. And it wasn't really a thing then.
I think very quickly, though, I don't know if we very quickly decided we were going to be together forever, but I think we very quickly realized that being on the same team was the answer. And I mean, same team is a mantra that we have just used for probably at least 10 years now.
Yeah.
But we probably didn't have it right at the very start. But we lived by that mantra anyway. And I never felt, when I was earning more money, that, oh, you know, Jodie's spending my money. And I never felt when you were earning money that, oh, I'm spending your money. I always just thought, like, we're together. At the moment, we're together. We're each other's teammates. We have an ecosystem, I guess, where sometimes more is going in here.
Yeah. Maybe
like you feel a bit of an onus. Okay, well, I'm not earning. I need to do more housework or something. But it just didn't matter to me.
With that. But then why? But I wonder if it's because we've always had money, because we've always, at least one of us has just been working, and it's never been like, oh, this is our last £10, how are we going to spend it? It's always been like, oh, well, I'll just earn more as well. Maybe that comes into it. But I also think we've had anti-role models as well, because there's a couple who we were friends with in Birmingham around that kind of time, when you just started joining up, and we'd been working together at the agency. And we'd go for meals with them, and at the end we'd just be like splitting the bill kind of between couples, and they'd have a conversation between themselves about who was going to pay the bill. And we'd be like, what do you mean? Like, you're together, like, it's all, doesn't it just come out of a joint account? And they didn't have a joint account, and they just kind of took it in turns, and that felt strange, and I didn't know why, but maybe it was just the extra admin that I just thought, like,
yeah, I think extra admin. I mean, they'd been together as long as us as well, and you know, they'd got just as strong a relationship as us. So it wasn't that, it was just definitely an idea of like separation with the money. And I think you can rationalize that any different type of way as well. You know, it's nice to be able to pay for my partner's dinner, like, fine, yeah, but get over yourself and realize that what a waste of time that is. You know, you've just got you're working on the same thing. You've been together for a few years. Like, if you're together for a few years and you don't feel like sharing money, like, there's a problem there. Either you've got some stuff to deal with yourself, or like you don't actually feel like that person's for you. You know, you absolutely have to have a joint account. Like, we've not used personal accounts for probably 10, 15 years, because there's just no point. Everything goes in the same thing. Everything comes out the same thing. So
I think at the start I kind of joked that having a joint account meant everything's half price.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like that. But then maybe it also helps that neither of us really are big spenders.
Yes.
I would be a big spender. I don't really look at the price of stuff. That's like a thing. But I could be a big spender. But then I'm not really that materialistic, so it doesn't really matter. So maybe that helps as well.
I think so. And I guess I'm trying to think, how do we kind of summarize the benefits of working together if we haven't done so at the moment. But I think it really reinforces this like same team idea. You can deal with the highs together, you celebrate them together, you can deal with the lows together. And really, when you're in a low position, when you're feeling stressed or sad, often this is just a lack of perspective, right? And all you need sometimes is someone to say, hey, look, you're going to feel completely different about this tomorrow. Or, hey, what's the problem? Let's look at what the solution should be. And when you've got someone else working on exactly the same problem with the same goals, it's so much easier to get yourself out of the, whatever catastrophizing you're doing. And so that's a real benefit. You basically stop at that kind of downward, psychological spiral really quickly. And I think even if we were both to have that at the same time, at least we could talk it out. And I think we're quite good at getting into a kind of solution focused mindset as opposed to something problems based. So I think overall the benefit is that knowing that you can work together. And I think once you've got a bit of a track record of working together, and you can look back at that and say, actually, there is just this general upward trajectory, not just in kind of business and financial success, but the relationship is stronger and you've achieved many things together. Even the harder times and the dips, it's like, do you know what? We are going to come through this better and stronger because that's what happens every single time. And therefore you can trust that it's going to go in the right direction. I
think, there's heaps of benefits. Do you want to talk about challenges? Because I've got some written down as like
challenges. I think let's do that because there's a few things that I want to maybe talk about that they might come out of the challenges.
So I think probably after the question around what's it like to work with your partner, the next thing that happens is someone will talk about switching off, or they'll say, "Aren't you just talking about work all the time?" And I'm like, "Yes." Great. Next question. But that is a serious thing because I think the worry of some people is that they'd be working with their partner, they'd be living with their partner, they're spending all their time with them. And it's like, where does home happen? Where do you switch off? And I think I feel differently about this now than I once did. And now I don't think it's fundamentally unhealthy to just want to talk about work all the time. I actually think that's a really good thing. If you're working on something that you are passionate about, that they are passionate about, you both think you're onto something, you're having a lot of fun with it, great, go crazy. That's probably what the best businesses are made of. I think the unhealthy thing is thinking that's unhealthy and then having this sense of guilt. Like if we were both like really onto something with, I don't know, building a funnel or something that we've recently like just geeked out on over a weekend or whatever. And then we were like, oh, let's just, this isn't healthy. The people say this isn't healthy. So therefore let's go and, I don't know, let's go watch a movie or do something that normal people do just so that we can like pretend that we're normal. Then that would be unhealthy. That would be a terrible, terrible way of being. So I think it's almost just letting go of this need to be like everyone else or need to just fulfill someone else's expectation of what is healthy or what is normal or what is okay and like create our own version. Because I think only me and you decide our boundaries, what we see as healthy, when we want to switch on and switch off. And also there's an appreciation that between us it might be different. So we definitely have the thing where if at any point anyone was like, I don't really want to talk about work now, it'd be like, okay. And then there's no hostility about that. It just is, it's just fine.
I think you've tapped on something that is actually a really big concept here, which is like if you are doing work that really feels like work and you constantly need to switch off from, like it's really like not your calling, and maybe you don't believe in a calling and a purpose and that kind of thing, and that's cool. And there are sayings along the lines of, find a job that doesn't feel like work and you'll never work a day in your life. I've probably bastardized something really badly there.
It's similar.
But the point is when you're working on something that uses skills that you have, and they're not skills that anyone else has, you're working towards something that that if you achieve that, it will achieve the goals that you have in life. And you actually believe that working on that project is going to achieve that. That is such a powerful driver to work. You want to do the work. It's not like, work is a pain in the backside. Like sometimes there'll be elements of work that's a pain. Like, I've got to deal with this and I've got to deal with that, whatever. Like it's great to not have those moments. But in general, I want to do the work because I'm like, yes, I can find flow. This is what I'm here to do. And I want to make money. I want to be able to, buy that apartment in a city center. And I want to be able to, take the day off whenever I want and travel wherever I want. And I'm motivated to do that in the same way that, when we go to the gym, it's not, oh, I've got to go to the gym today. It's like, yes, I get to go to the gym today. And so I think more and more, especially with self-employment, magic internet money, where people can really earn money pretty much however they want, and to a degree work as much as they want, because you can potentially create money while you sleep if you know what you're doing. The lines between work and not work are really blurred, and I think when you're working with your partner, it's even more so, because sometimes we get to work on things together, like building a cool funnel, and we're like, yeah, cool, like this uses my skill in kind of data analytics, and we're both good at copywriting, and you're thinking about how the visuals might be and what social proof we can put on, and well, can I speak to this person and get a video from them to add to the sales page or whatever. And it's like a really fun collaboration and use of our skills, and that's fun to create something of value there. And I think creating together as opposed to consuming together, which might be the alternative, let's put a movie on, like it's so much more rewarding to do the former.
But then what you said as well about how you could spend all the time on it, that's another kind of interesting thing around what's healthy and what's not healthy. Because I think we're both quite aware of this, because you're essentially working from home all the time, but also you're like your business partner's next to you all the time. Then there's also a sense that even though you're not being watched, you could perceive yourself as being watched, and it's almost like you're living with your business partner, but you're kind of living with your boss. Like if we're both each other's bosses, then it's like, oh my God, that's a really bad idea. And I never want to, first of all, you never want to feel like you're being judged for what you're doing at any given time. Because I just think if I want to work, I'm going to work. If I don't want to work, I'm not going to work. But then I never want to have any expectation on what you're doing at any given time. Because if I was working and Ben wasn't working, like I don't want to be thinking, oh, why is he not working? Because I am. And at the same time, you don't want to have any guilt because you're like, well, I just don't feel like it right now, but she does. So finding it's boundaries again, but finding a happy set of rules of how you will and won't operate around that, I feel like is really important too. And then maybe it's stepping away from the idea that everything has to be equal the whole time, because I don't feel like you need to contribute equally. And I think constantly trying to make sure it's equal would be just wrong as well.
If you're keeping score, I mean, that would be an absolute nightmare to do it. But having said that, we know that we are both very driven individuals, and we both have a very high work ethic, and that if push comes to shove, we will both work until something is done.
But is that because we've got the accountability?
Possibly, because I think we're both accountable to ourselves, and we know that because of if someone's not observing us. If I'm not being observed in the gym, I'm going to do that workout, and I'm not doing that workout for you. I'm doing it for me. And so I think it's a double whammy with us, because we're very self-motivated. We hold ourselves to very high standards, and I think therefore we would also hold each other to a high standard, because it's like, come on, you know you want to be that good. And sometimes it's just a reminder, do you want to be that billionaire? Do you want to be the best in the world at something? Or is this a day off? And sometimes it's just that little reminder to be like, oh yeah, I do. And I also think the big thing is you just don't want to let each other down. It's not because I'm going to get told off, because I know that would never happen. But I don't want to be the one letting the side down. I think it's that team mentality. If you've ever played team sport, you never want to let your team down. And if you push yourselves harder when you're in a group, when you're all working together. And I think that's the same thing. And that's probably one of the areas where if you're not 100% happy in your relationship, and there's some level of, I don't know, disrespect for one another, or some level of disdain, that's quite a strong word. But if there is anything in there that's creating a niggle, this is the kind of thing that would expose it. But because I think we've had that time together and we are well aligned, we're like, no, we're on each other's team. We don't want to let each other down. We're going to work really hard. And there isn't ever a keeping score thing. Although you've told me before that in the past you've thought, Ben's not working as hard as I am.
Yeah, I probably have thought that before. Yeah, I was trying to think if I've ever had that like disdain, resentment kind of feeling, and I probably maybe it started creeping in at some point. Maybe it was around naps, because like you take a lot of naps, and I don't really take naps. So sometimes when you're napping, I'm like, I'm working. Ben's napping. I'd love to be napping, but then I'm not. I don't care. I don't want to take a nap. But then I don't really have that anymore. But maybe it's just because I just decided to let it go. I think that the biggest mental shift for me was going from me owning a business and it being like, even though it was our business because we're together and everything else, it was still, I felt like it was like my business. And now the one we're running now is like our business. I feel like my biggest challenge was those two things, and thinking, are things now, do I need to see things in a different way? But then once I kind of actually realized that even though it's our business together, I still kind of take the CEO role and you still kind of take the CTO role, then I could just be like, oh, okay, well, I'm just the CEO. Like, yeah, it's our business that we own together, rather than it being like the business that I started, but we've still just got those kind of roles because that's just how we work best. But I had to do that intentionally. I feel like I went through a bit of a phase where I was like, we just have different styles. So we can't just pretend that we're just like equal business partners in it.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that also comes down to like working styles. And, I can often like think of something for a long, I might be doing nothing, but I'm thinking about something. And then I'll make, an absolute game changing discovery because I'm a genius. So I don't have to work as long, because I can just work, very short periods of unrealistic amounts of output.
Are you actually a genius? Does mentor mean genius?
I mean, I think so, technically.
Yeah.
Clinically a genius. But I'm not saying that I'm actually not working and then working for half an hour. It's like, yeah, I've done for the week now because I've delivered so much value in that time. But I do think that there are different ways of working. And if someone's doing something that just requires serious output, you're going to be spending a long time doing something that isn't actually delivering a huge amount of value. And that's why as a business owner, you never want to be doing that kind of thing anyway, because it's not high leverage. And I wonder if ultimately we have evolved to be doing stuff that is more individually high leverage.
Yeah. That's a big, there's so many points here. So I think the high leverage thing is interesting because neither of us want to be doing busy work. And then I think naps are actually quite high leverage because you can think more, and because I think that at the start of a business, it feels like you rest to recharge and you rest to just go again. But I think that maybe second business, or just when you're in a slightly different stage, you're resting to reflect. And so then it is just about connecting the dots and figuring out the way forward before you go. Because if we all know we're capable of going and just doing the action, then the important thing isn't how fast or prolifically you can do the action. It's how well you can think about which action you're going to do. So I think the high leverage thing is a really good point. I also did want to actually mention about the clinical genius thing, just because I saw it on a forum at one point. It was like, what Christmas present or birthday present do you get for the person who has everything? And I think it was like Mom's Nails. It was something a bit random that I was just part of because we had a client in that space. So I just happened to be on this forum. And someone said, if you are with someone who you never know how to buy them gifts, you should get them a test, an application test. Was it? Yeah, you should get them the exam for Mensa.
It's an IQ test, basically.
Yeah, and Mensa's the top 2% of people in the world in different countries for their IQ. So I was like, this is a good present for Ben. And so for his birthday one year, I was like, your present is that you are going to sit an exam in 8 days' time. And if you pass it, you're in Mensa, and that's cool because you get to, wear the t-shirt and stuff. and then so he was like, yeah, pumped. Because if you've got someone in your life like this, you will know how they will feel about a present like this. But yeah, I got you that present. You went and passed, we went to take the exam, and then you got your acceptance letter in the post. And then I actually did buy you the t-shirt. Yep. So now you have a t-shirt. So yeah, he is actually a genius, but it's also a really good, it's a really good present. But the thing I actually want to come on to, because I think it's a really big part of how we work and the success and then why it works, is the Dr. Love, the love doctor stuff, and the indicator of a successful relationship.
Yep.
So the story behind this is there's a doctor called Dr. John Gottman, and he is known as Dr. Love, and he's partly known as Dr. Love because he conducts all his experiments in the Love Lab. And he conducted one of the only longitudinal studies on couples. And so it happened, he interviewed all these different sets of couples, but a long time apart. It might have been even 10 years apart. I think it was about 35 sets of couples. So he got them all into his Love Lab. And what he did was got them all hooked up to these sensors and stuff that could tell all their kind of vitals and what was going on. And then all he did was he just asked them questions about what they'd done that day, about their lives together, just regular stuff. And then, so he interviewed them. I think he interviewed them separately, he interviewed them together, and then he sent them all away, analysed all the data, and then he predicted whether they would still be together in 10 years. And all the ones where he thought, yes, they will still be together in 10 years, he called them masters. And all the ones that he thought, no, they won't be together in 10 years, he called them disasters. And I think, I'm paraphrasing a lot of this, like look up the actual study and I'll link it if you want to go into it in more detail. But I think he guessed with almost 100% accuracy who would be still together in 10 years. And that was validated when they came back and he assessed them again and he asked them about if they were still together and they said whether they were or weren't. And the one thing that it all came down to was the resting heart rate of the people in the relationship. And the resting heart rate is something I think about all the time because the idea...
It's the heart rate of when they were in the other person's company, right?
The resting heart rate of each individual person when they were in the company of their partner. And so why that's just really interesting is because it's like if you two kind of put each other on edge, or if you two do things that kind of don't relax each other to the point where your heart rate's elevated, it's almost like you're in the room with like a tiger and you don't know if you're going to be attacked at any given moment. And we've definitely hung out with couples like this before, like they're getting at each other, they're not same team, they're not aligned. Someone could say something that puts the other one into this like rage and that's how they are together. But if you can work out a way of working together where you just are very relaxed in each other's company, then that becomes an indicator of your longevity in work, in business, in life. And it's probably linked to cortisol as well. Because if you're hanging out with someone who is just putting you on edge all the time, you're always about to go into fight or flight or freeze. You've got so much cortisol running around your body that it's not sustainable. And that's what Dr. Love said. He was like, if your partner's doing this with you, if you're on edge with your partner, then you're both exhibiting behavior that fundamentally won't work. And so you will just break up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this comes down to the boundaries thing as well, which I know we've touched on briefly, but I think having strong boundaries, communicating those boundaries with each other, but then really respecting each other's boundaries is a big step towards that, and also working well together. Because if you really know when someone's locked in, they don't want to be interrupted, or if you know someone's working patterns, or when they're going to the gym, or when they're eating or whatever, and you know that it's going to really irritate them for those things to be shifted, don't encroach on that. You stay away from those boundaries. And I think that shows a level of respect for one another. It's just let them cook, let them get on with it. If you know what those boundaries are, they're going to respect yours, so respect theirs. And I think that mutual respect of each other's boundaries, providing they're communicated, because if you don't communicate your boundaries, then you've got the only person to blame is yourself. That is a huge step forward towards working together. And I think if we were in a work environment with a colleague who wasn't your partner, wasn't a member of your family, you would respect their boundaries in a completely different way to the way you potentially respect the boundaries of your partner, because you not saying you take your partner for granted, but they're like an extension of you. And it's so easy if you're feeling irritable to just put that on them. And I think it has to get quite a lot worse for that to happen in a formal work environment with a work colleague, or if one of you with a colleague was to be a little bit low energy, let's say, that other person might not bite back in the same way. Whereas couples, it's quite easy just to snap, and then you start arguing. And I think that's where people have said, oh, I could never work with my partner, because they've been working on something together. Someone's crossed a boundary, either knowingly or not. And then that's caused a bit of, well, you've done this, or well, I've done that. A little bit of competition creeps in, a little bit of scorekeeping creeps in. And as you can with a partner, it's quite easy if someone doesn't grasp a bit of self-awareness, it then can just cascade and it becomes a full-blown argument, and
it's a trigger grid thing.
Whatever a trigger grid is.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
So I think if you're having working days with your partner and you're like on edge because you think you may end up having a major argument, and you're having 2 or 3 major arguments every week, like that is literally a way to put an end to the working relationship. And like, right, we can't do this. We can't go on like this. Therefore, it's not possible. We work as a couple, but not together. And I was likening it a little bit to CrossFit. And a lot of people are like, CrossFit, kill it with fire. I got injured doing CrossFit. I know loads of people have injured themselves doing CrossFit. But a lot of the movements in CrossFit are not inherently injurious. They expose poor mobility. They expose poor flexibility. They expose weakness in certain ranges of motion. And basically just how we don't move very well, or the way we should be able to move. Someone with full health, who moves the way God designed, could do CrossFit without injury. CrossFit exposes these bad elements of posture. And I think it's very similar to working with your partner. Working together with your partner should not inherently be difficult. It should be fantastic. You know each other inside out. You know the strengths and weaknesses of your partner. You're working together on the same goal. It should work fine. But if it doesn't, that's really potentially exposing underlying issues that you have in your relationship. And maybe your relationship is really, really strong, but there's actually 1 or 2 things that actually, when the pressure's on, start to fall apart a little bit. And so therefore, you could say, well, if you can't work with your partner, you're with the wrong partner. And that's not actually the truth. It's just, actually, you probably need to work on something. It's not that, I can't work together. It's like, actually, we could work together, but these are the things that we would need to address. But that takes a lot of self-awareness.
Maybe people don't want to do it because they're scared as well. Because then it's almost like, imagine that there's a couple and they have never worked together before. They're not only going to potentially start a business together, which is a challenge, but then they're also going to push each other's buttons, probably, inevitably. And then that's going to be another challenge, which then adds to the challenge of working out your own thing. So it's almost like, I feel like getting over that hurdle, like probably the biggest learning curve that we had was just at the start, figuring out the other person's boundaries, how you're going to do it. But then once you're over that hurdle, I think it only gets better. I think right now how we have it is that if we ever have like a kind of disagreement, or we don't see eye to eye on anything, I think we're both actually quite nerdy about it. And it'll end up being, I got triggered. Why did I get triggered? And then I'm like, it's because like, it's not you, but you said that thing, and that reminded me of that other thing, and that triggered me, and then I've now got this, and that's why I said that other thing that I said, because I'm acting in an angrily, like, scarcity mindset way that isn't my best self. So like, sorry about that thing. That's why I'll work on it in the future. Like, I feel like our kind of disagreements now are actually quite cute, because it's like, I feel like if you ever made me angry, it's never actually you making me angry. It's always me letting myself get triggered by something.
Yeah, and that comes down to the track record, I guess, a little bit. It's like, we know that we can work together really well. We can deal with challenging things really well. So something like that has happened. Something out of the ordinary has gone on, whether it was you or me, that's caused that cascade. And maybe talk about the trigger grid that you mentioned, like explain that for the people.
So the trigger grid thing is, because I mentioned getting triggered, like, when you get like triggered. Some people, like often you'll feel it very physically, and some people feel it, they might get hot-headed. Some people get a kind of like rush of blood to the head. I feel it in my heart. So I might, if I feel angry, my heart almost skips a beat and I'm like, ugh. And then I know that the next thing I'm going to say is the wrong thing to say. So I don't say it.
You say it sometimes.
Yes, yeah. So I'm working on it. But then imagine if there's like a trigger that I have that I just roll with it and I start getting angry or going off on one. And then that triggers you because you're like, hang on, I haven't done anything. Why is someone having a go at me? So then Ben gets triggered into something else. And then because Ben's now talking to me like I'm stupid and I'm like, no, hang on, I'm not stupid, blah, blah, that triggers me again. And then I say something else and you almost get like so far into it that by the time you're kind of 2 or 3 triggers deep, you're like locked in this place where you're not gonna get out of it because you're not even operating from the part of your brain that is normal, that is like functioning normally. So I feel like the last thing you want to do is get into that position because it's just not helpful at all. And I feel like what we will do right now is just at all costs avoid going down some kind of spiral. And that all comes back down to self-awareness. I think first it's creating psychological safety for the other person so that you try not to put them on edge because no one wants to live or work with someone that puts them on edge. Then it's about noticing your own triggers. And then it's about having I think it's courage. I think it's courage. I don't think it's easy to be really riled up about something, be so convinced that you are not in the wrong, and the other person also be so convinced that they are not in the wrong, and to say, look, let's just like this isn't us. Let's just get on. I think that's challenging and needs courage to get out of.
Absolutely, and I think that's why we even came up with a word.
Oh yeah.
It's not a trigger word, but that would have been a good
safe word.
It's kind of like a safe word in that no one's gonna when you're deep in an argument, and even if you were like to right, I'm sorry, the other person's gonna say, no, you're not sorry, you're just saying that to end the argument. Not that you would say that, dear. You just need something that will break it. And the Dr. Love and his partner are very much like, just take a break. Just say, let's talk about this in an hour's time. They'll say, look, we're not going to get anywhere productive here. I'm not leaving this. I'm going to come back to it, but let's just have an hour. And then all of that tension dissipates and you come back with a far more objective view. But
and the specificity is the most important part of that.
Yes.
The idea, it's not like, oh, I'll come back to it later. It's like, no, I'll come back to it in an hour. I'm setting an alarm on my phone. So when this goes off, we're going to talk about it. But in the meantime, we want to chill out or something like that.
Yes. But before we learned of all this thing, we just used to have a word. We chose the word falafel because it's a word that neither of us would say. And it's kind of like, you want to say sorry, but not sorry. You don't want to admit you're wrong, but you know that you might be wrong and you think you're right, but you appreciate that your partner thinks they're right. And you're just kind of like falafel. And that's a word where like you can't, the rule, because you create this rule beforehand, if someone says falafel, you cannot just be like, oh, F your falafel, like shove your falafel, wherever. It's like if someone has the courage to say that word, you respect them because they said it before you said it. So that the person that says falafel first kind of wins because it's like that's the word that's like, oh, I've had to think just for a second and get some reflection and be like, I don't want to argue. There's no point in arguing. Let's just not turn this into something massive. We need to just stop and break. And that's what we did. But I honestly think the kind of having a kind of safe word that you use there that is like sacred, or just saying, look, we have to come back to this, even if it's in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it's so much better than to make it worse and worse and worse.
And I don't think it's about trying to avoid conflict. I think it's almost like thinking conflict is going to happen. If you are two smart people, driven people, you're probably quite dangerous against each other. Like I often think that. I think I wouldn't want us to be enemies because we're just like, that's almost why we avoid like getting down into a kind of trigger grid, bad argument situation, because we can both be so sharp, so fast. And if that's against each other, it's like it would be horrible. But when it's like aligned and the energy is going in the same direction, it works really well. And you'll have this too if you're thinking about going into business with your partner. You probably are strong-willed, independent, driven people. Like you're going to disagree, and then it's just about figuring out the SOP for how you deal with it when it inevitably happens, which it for sure will. I think something that I think about quite a lot is just this question: how do you want to feel, and how do you want to feel in your relationship? How do you want to feel when you're working together with your partner? And being aligned on that is a really valuable exercise, because I think that we both know that we're working together on businesses because I think it's a values match ultimately, because both of our biggest value is probably freedom. And then working together means that we're working towards that shared value of freedom. But then the how do you want to feel for me is always calm, competent, and confident. And then if you know that, then that's how you're going to make me feel. And then if you know how you want to feel, then we both have that conversation. And then you're like building your business, creating the best outcome for your customers, your investors, your stakeholders, your team, whoever else. But then you want to create the best working situation for your partner at the same time. I think you just see them as another person who you're trying to look after and get positive testimonials from that you can put on your sales page. Easy.
I think people thinking about working together, obviously there might be some logistical challenges there, because someone might have a job and they're trying to kind of start not having a job, or maybe you're in two separate businesses, or self-employed and someone's running a bigger business, for example. If it's something that you want to do, I do think there are places to start there. I do think trying individual projects, helping out with a specific task or job, is a smart place to start. But I think very early on, a lot of these things that we've discussed need to be established. So you need to decide what does the working environment that each of you look like? Because it shouldn't necessarily be that, someone has to work in an office, but people might not feel like they want to work together in a home office. Someone may much prefer working in a coffee shop, for example. Over time, we've ended up working from home together, and that's fine. That's all we need. But knowing the environment that people want to work in and respecting that is important, because you don't want to take someone out of an environment that they're not happy working in. I also think if there's something project-based that you're working on, you really need to define the role and responsibility and the remit, because that's something that really cannot be communicated well between partners. Because I think it's really easy to be just like, oh, we'll work that out as we go along. Or, this is something that we can almost like intuitively understand. We kind of know each other pretty well. We know how we work. But I would say that, it's been 12 years we've worked together to work out exactly what Jodie should be doing and what I should be doing. And if you don't really communicate what someone should be doing, it's so easy to like think someone is responsible for this thing and neither of you do it, and then that becomes a point of contention. Oh, well, you said do this. Well, obviously you were going to do that, and you're falling over something that was so avoidable. And this is the point. The first time you try this, it has to go well, because if it doesn't, one of you is going to be like, we are never doing that again. And so it needs to be something that is defined with a start and an end to the project, some clear deliverable, and you need to be absolutely clear what someone is responsible for in terms of that delivery, and know what each other's boundaries are in terms of working. If someone is going to say, I'm done working now, it's 7 p.m, that has to be respected. It can't be, oh, well, come on, I was expecting you to have done that by tomorrow. You need to have this mutual level of respect for each other. And, if it doesn't work out, then straight away what you have to work on, or what this working kind of compatibility really looks like. Because I really think more people are capable of it than they realize.
For sure.
I would say 90% of people are like, I could never work with my partner. 5% are like, oh, I think I could, but we haven't. And maybe it's the 5% that actually say, yeah, I could work, or they do work.
Yeah.
90% are like, nah, I couldn't do it. And I just can't believe that it's that many.
No.
That's showing, to me, that's saying, I have a relationship with someone that's really good on like kind of 60%, 70% of things, but there's 30% of things we just can't do together. And for me, that's like, yeah, that's because you haven't worked on some stuff. There's definitely more to this.
I feel like after this conversation, I want to put the transcript into like Claude or ChatGPT and be like, what are the rules for successfully working with your partner? But I've kind of been listing them as we've been talking to see if I can come out with some like really actionable, this is what you should do or this is what you should not do. But I'm thinking what you said about ownership is really important. The idea that you take ownership over your separate tasks and you just own it, and you're the person who you need to not need following up or chasing, because that would be a nightmare. Imagine hiding in your own home.
Yeah, or like a backseat driver. Yeah. Someone says, oh, why are you doing it this way? Or do that, you know.
And it's like, if this is my area, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to tell you when I want your help, and vice versa as well. Yeah, and then I put don't compete, like kind of obviously, but I even feel like, even almost joking about competition, we did the one thing that we competed on was quite funny, because we were running some YouTube ads. Yeah, YouTube ads, and we recorded the exact same script separately, and then we ran them as separate ads, and we just saw like which ones would perform the best, whether you delivering or me delivering. I think it actually worked out like pretty much exactly the same, but we would only compete with each other in that kind of environment like that. But everything else, it's never like, oh, well, I'm bringing in these leads and what are you doing? Like, it just wouldn't be the way. I feel like self-awareness is a really big part of this as well. And then two things that we do. One is, not just us, but everyone in Team Coach Fox has got a user manual, which is, this is who I am, this is how, this is the values that are important to me, this is how I like to be communicated with, and they're really useful. We read each other's, and then we know how to kind of work with each other really well. We also did our Myers-Briggs assessments, and we know that I'm an ENTJ, Ben's an INTJ, so the kind of looking at where you're the same can help knowing where you'll work together on really well. But knowing where you're different is quite interesting, because if you tend towards being an introvert and I tend towards being an extrovert, then it might make more sense that I'm more kind of outward, front facing in the business, whereas you're more behind the scenes. It might make sense why, it might explain why, if we go to conferences together, after 3 days of just being around people all the time, I'm like, yes, this is amazing, I want to meet more people, this is so good. And you're like,
I don't want to see anyone ever again. Yeah.
Ever. Leave me alone, everyone. So yeah, just that stuff. I've also got something to do with like undertones. Because if we ever had a problem in our business, relationship, anything, I would talk about it straight away, like with him. It's not like something would be going on with us and I'd be talking to Joanna, our general manager, and saying, oh, Ben's not done this, Ben's not done that, or like speaking to a friend about it. It's like, I would never say anything without you there that I wouldn't say in front of you. And because I never want to create these layers or these undertones or anything that's just this bad energy. And I think that that's quite an important thing, to kind of air everything straight away. And
it's linked to being passive aggressive as well, isn't it? Like passive aggressiveness is just the worst. And we almost, as a rule, we are not, but if one of us is passive aggressive, it is just like come on, are you seriously being passive aggressive? Because it's just a terrible way to communicate, and it shows it's such a shortcoming of you to have to be passive aggressive. And yes, sometimes it might happen in public with someone you don't know, because sometimes it just feels like the right thing to do. But with each other, being passive aggressive, it's pathetic.
Yeah, I hate it as well.
Utterly pathetic.
But it's like a personal kind of boundary that if someone else was being passive aggressive, I wouldn't ever pander to it. If someone was like, oh, well, I wish I blah, 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 I'd never be like, oh, you okay? I'd just ignore them.
Yeah.
I'd cut them out.
Just say what you mean, or shut up. Yeah.
And then the final one I thought is just around playing to strengths. And I think we do this as well a lot, intentionally. And I don't know, there's an element of working on your weaknesses and getting good at stuff that doesn't come naturally. But at the same time, I really like the idea that it feels sometimes like you can be my second brain. If there's something that I'm working on and there's some element of it where I'm like, I hate this and it's sucking the soul out of me to do it, but I know that Ben would really love this, that's when I would just be like, hey, I need to borrow your brain. And then it's similar actually in our team with Joanna, who's our general manager. She's very behind the scenes and wants to be behind the scenes, and she'll sit on webinars that I do where I'm just presenting and chatting to everyone, and she'll just be like, this is my worst nightmare to do myself, but I love that you're doing it too. So the whole kind of, I feel like I'm in awe of people who have different strengths, And I like that they leave me to get on with my strengths at the same time, which also involves a lot of self-awareness and a lot of, maybe you just have to like each other. Maybe this all comes down to...
That should have been just as a whole video.
That's it, just like how to work with your other half, just like them.
Yeah.
Easy. But yeah, that's my list.
No, I think they're good. And I still feel like there will be kind of questions over if you're working together, how do you switch off? And we've kind of touched on the fact that like we don't really switch off. It's a more fluid existence. But we do have times where it's like we're not working, and often it's just a case of like booking something in, because we sometimes, if we weren't going out to a restaurant or we weren't meeting up with friends, there would be a propensity for us to work quite late, and I have to stop at least half an hour before I go to bed because I won't go to sleep. You're more capable of like working until the time you need to go into bed and still sleeping. But I will often kind of say sometimes to you, do you need to be doing this? And sometimes you will be like, I'm just going to finish this one thing, or actually like, no, you're right, I don't need to do this now. And so very gently, like trusting that other person knows what they're doing, but very gently saying, hey, do you need to do that right now? And respecting their answer is a good way of just stopping like working being completely indefinite. And often we'll be both working and you'll say, when are we doing this? And I was like, well, I'm just waiting for you to finish. And you'd be like, oh no, I was waiting for you to finish whatever you were doing. And they're, communicating, be like, right, I've done what I need to do now. I'll keep working as long as you're working, but as soon as you're done, we can be done. That's a good way. But yeah, I just think booking things into your diary, right? We're going this evening of the week, we're going to go to this restaurant, and this evening we're going to see those friends. Like you can't work, and they're great because that gives you some deadlines. And when you've got deadlines, you work more efficiently, but you also prioritize well, right? I don't have all evening to do these 10 tasks, which are the 3 tasks that I can do before we actually have to go to this booking we've got. And so that's a good mechanism, I think, to stop just endless working.
And there's also something quite magical about the morning when you wake up and no one has checked their phone. And sometimes we're very intentional about both just not getting on to any device, because then you can just have that kind of dream-like state where you just chat about whatever. And if it happens to be work, it happens to be work. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's quite nice, sometimes putting that off as long as possible so that you're kind of just you, and then the outside world comes in when you want it to be in.
Yes, and linking to that, we also do spend quite a lot of time like not working together. So obviously we train together in the gym, which is a whole nother episode, but we'll also just go for walks or slow runs together, and we do talk and we process. So often there's a kind of realignment, and that realignment isn't necessarily on work stuff. What are you working on? Do you think this is more important? It could be ideation, it could be breakthroughs, but it's also a broader thing. You're going for a walk and you'll touch on subjects that are work related, but it's also kind of lifestyle related. Like, are we spending enough time doing this? Like, should we do more of that? Oh, should we book that thing in? And I think those moments of reflection that you get in during the week really help the working relationship. And also the training thing is really interesting, because often people will say, how do you work together? And I'll be like, working together is a piece of cake compared to training together. And in short, the coach-athlete relationship, which Jodie and I tend to have when we're training, is far more stressful, even though many of the components are work-related. But when you're in the gym environment, it's so different because it can be relatively high stakes. If Jodie's doing an equipped bench press, she could be holding double her body weight over her head, essentially. So she's got to be really, really pumped up. I've got to be really, really switched on. You have to make split-second decisions. And you don't have the time and space that you have when you're working together and be like, can I just think about this for 5 minutes? And it's so easy because there's adrenaline, there might be loud music playing.
And it's physical as well, it's not just mental.
Exactly. It's so easy for someone to say something that they shouldn't have said and for the other person to misinterpret that. And there's a level of frustration that you can have. Jodie's doing as hard as she can. She's frustrated if something goes wrong, and I'm trying to coach. And I'm frustrated it's gone wrong, and I'm frustrated both at myself because I'm like, I'm not articulating this coaching well, or maybe I put the shirt on wrong, or maybe I've said the wrong cue, or I might be frustrated at Jodie, so I'm like, why haven't you just lifted it? Why haven't you just stood up with the squat? You know, and so we can be
I'm trying.
in the heat of the moment in the gym. It's far easier to fall out with each other because those trigger grids, that negative spiral can happen way faster because of that intensity. You can't say, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to go away for half an hour and come back to it. You don't have a choice there.
Yeah.
And any coach athlete relationship, it doesn't have to be, you know, with someone's partner. It gets strained. Like plenty of athletes will say, I was in tears halfway through my session, and the coach is annoyed. And it takes a really good coach to not get really vested. But when you've got a coach athlete that are actually competing, it's not just like a personal trainer relationship. It's a kind of, this person is actually trying to become a really, really good athlete. And you could have worked together for years and years and years, a full Olympic cycle or something. It's obviously going to get very, very emotional. And in the here and now in a training session, much easier to fall apart. So training together is far, far harder, in my opinion, than running a business together.
Yeah, I feel like we almost need to work on that a bit more before we talk about it in an episode.
We haven't sussed. No, I think we're very good at it. I think we're very good at it.
But then, so hot take, actually, just thinking about something that happened the other day in the gym, and also combining that with how lots of couples are like, oh, I could never work together. I think that if you think of kind of cause and effect, someone made me mad, then I was mad, and that's kind of the Freudian school of philosophy, that the world is like that. But then we've been reading, one of my favorite books of all time is The Courage to Be Disliked, and it's more about Adlerian psychology, and that's all around the idea that you had a goal, and therefore you created the situation to achieve your goal. So on a practical point of view, with what we've been talking about right now, if your goal is to not work with your partner or to not get on well with your partner in a work situation, you'll then create the scenarios or create the reasons that fulfill that goal. And I think in a real situation the other day, do you remember I can't remember if it was just before my last set of squats or if it was something, and then you suddenly had a brainwave about something work related, and you were just like, oh, what about this thing? And I was like literally just going to squat, and I was like, do you mind if we talk about this after? Because I'm just getting in the zone right now. And it was like I didn't think anything of it other than like Ben had a thought that he wanted to share with me, and it just happened to be like roughly the wrong time. And then you're like, oh yeah, of course, we'll talk about it after.
Totally my bad. I just didn't realize, we will talk to each other about business stuff like during warm-up or between like light sets or between exercises that don't require like focus, and I just didn't realize you were kind of at a working weight, and so it was totally my bad. I was just like, what am I doing?
But then if I'd have had the goal that we were going to fall out, then I would have been like, what are you doing? Can't you see I'm like squatting now? Can't you see this is important? Blah, blah, blah. And then it would have been like an argument. So you can always just have the goal to not fall out, and then you invariably don't, because you can just decide that you're not going to argue with someone, then they're not going to argue back, because no one just creates an argument out of nowhere, and then it works. And I think seeing the funny side is also a really important part of it. The idea that like it's actually quite funny if I'm like working really hard, going to town on something, and you're like, I'm just going to take a nap. Or if I'm like about to do a really big squat, and you're like, I just had this really big work epiphany, and it's like, it's not the right time. And like, it's funny.
Yeah,
I quite like that.
You've got to also cut each other some slack. It's not, no one's perfect. Like, we're not perfect. And knowing that, and knowing that someone's going to say something that they didn't quite mean, or say it in a certain way that they didn't really mean it to come across like that. You have to absolutely cut some slack somewhere, because it's, if you do want to fall out, you want to find a reason to get upset with someone, like you will find it. So I think just lower your threshold for being triggered if possible, and just give the benefit of the doubt and be like, you know what, that's not a big deal. They probably didn't mean it that way. Our relationship and our happiness is the most important thing in all this. Let's just crack on and be productive. Align yourself with the solution as fast as possible.
So it's like having really high standards of yourself still, because I think that's what ultimately makes you succeed in business, but then cutting the other person slack and leaving them to it. Do you mean still having high standards for yourself, or do you mean cutting yourself slack as well?
No, I don't mean cutting yourself slack. I never feel like I need to cut myself some slack. Like, I kind of feel intuitively, if I feel like, oh, overtrained or I'm working really hard or like I'm literally getting less productive now because I can't read the screen anymore because I'm really tired. Like I kind of know, but I never think, that'll do. Like I just don't. I never think that. And I think
Falling sick.
Well, yeah, because I think ultimately you're going to be cutting yourself slack subconsciously sometimes. Like sometimes you're going to be like, okay, I'm done. And that may have been the point that you were cutting yourself some slack.
Yeah.
So you're kind of going to do that anyway. If you're also making excuses, I don't feel like it today, you're going to be cutting yourself so much slack, you're not doing anything. And I think we have that, do the hard thing, like do hard things. Like I think we're both very good at doing hard things. Like we went for a run the other day. We were not conditioned to be in cold Birmingham weather to go for a run. It was approximately 1 degree outside. And we were like, oh man, but we got to do it. It's not like, do you feel like going for a run? You're going to do the run anyway. And we're both like, not in a toxic way, like not in we're going to just push each other to do like the worst things. But if we've planned to go for a run, we're not going to bottle the run. We're going to do it. It's not like doing something stupid. Or should we actually, should we do it with just underwear on and go for 25 miles, even though we'd only said we're going to do 10K?
Yeah, so we said 10K and then it was going to be 12. And then you were like, should we just do 15? And then I was like, well, we might as well do a half marathon now. But we didn't end up doing a half marathon. We just did the 15.
We did the 15. The scenery was lovely. And so we just thought, while we're out, we've done the hard bit now. Getting out the house and starting the run was the hard bit. Yeah. Let's just go that little bit further. But if you'd have been like, no, forget that, we're turning around and going home, I'd have been like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of we've talked before about this positive flywheel.
Yep.
As in, I think we have it very much in training, because if this positive flywheel where you improve, so I imagine if Ben improves as a coach, puts me forward a better training program, and then I improve as an athlete because I'm following that training program, and then he thinks, wow, she's really good, I need to be a better coach because I need to take it to the next level, and then I perform really well at a competition, and then he's like, oh my god, that the next level. Like it's this kind of positive flywheel where everything you do is reinforcing the next behavior up, and then you're always improving. And I think you can have that very much in a business sense where you're improving. You kind of want to step up. Like you never want to feel like you're letting the side down. You never want to be the weakest player. You see them doing well and then you want to do well as well. I think we have that very much, but I can imagine that working the other way round if you let it get the other way round. And that's where it's like,
absolutely.
If you're not working now, I'm not going to work now either. Well, you didn't work yesterday, so I'm not going to work today. Oh, well, I'll leave that thing till tomorrow. Okay, well, if you're leaving that, like it could spiral down, and then you don't have a business anymore.
Well, you could see me going for a nap, and I could have and you're going to be like, oh, well, I'll go for a nap in 20 minutes then. So you go and start a nap, and I get up, and well, Jodie's having a nap. Well, I might as well go for a nap. And like you could just be on this like napping cycle. And I do totally believe this.
Dream. Why aren't we doing this?
Just nap all the time. I think. But we see this with with people like eating habits is a small one as well. If someone's like, oh, I'm just going to eat this bag of Cheetos, and then someone's like, oh, well, they're letting themselves go a little bit, I'm also going to do this, and oh, they only spent 20 minutes on the treadmill, I can get away with only doing 18. It's basically the same. And over weeks and months, the compounding effect is just colossal. And if you're not both getting better, you're both getting worse.
Yeah.
And if one of you is getting better and one of you is getting worse, you were in a happy relationship. Newsflash, you're not going to be in a happy relationship, because if one of you is ambitious and driven and improving as a human being, the person like on a downward spiral is getting increasingly not at the standard required to be with that person. And that's the reality. Divorce is higher than ever, people. And it's because of this. It's because it's because of Cheetos and Instagram.
So that's quite an interesting thing as well, because I think it might actually be hard to do that without getting defensive. So I was on a podcast yesterday where the podcast host, he's really cool. He researched everything before I went on the episode, to the point that he actually interviewed Ben for 15 minutes. And also he interviewed Joanna for 15 minutes. And then when I arrived, he knew everything about me. And he had a bowl on the table of cream eggs, and I love cream eggs. And you can only get them in England. You can only get properly made ones in England. And so he made me take them home with me. And so right now we've got like 8 cream eggs in the cupboard. But I would just happily sit there and eat all those cream eggs one by one. But I know I'm not going to do that, because I compete in a weight class. I don't want to put on weight. But then if I was just sitting there schnaffling cream eggs, at what point would you be like, are you sure you want to do that? And then would I be like, oh, my boyfriend thinks I'm fat. And then like, how would I don't know, like I think you have to be quite secure in yourself, and also you would have to be quite careful about how you delivered that information. Just because.
Yeah, I might say, look, if you've had five.
Do you think
five's enough? Do you think that one would be better to have tomorrow? But it's tactful, but you know, and we know that it's everything that we say to each other is said with love. So it should be tactful, but it's where, like, if you're slightly triggered by something, do you think you're done with the cream eggs now? Like you don't want to say it like
aggressive.
that. Yeah, you don't exactly. You don't want to say it like that. It's just like hey, in the same way that I might say, hey, do you still need to do that work right now? It might be, hey, do you really need that extra cream egg?
Do you really need that nap?
Look, I'm team nap, if I'm being honest, because I think my productivity is elevated after just a 20-minute nap. But that's another episode.
Yeah.
I think we've probably covered most. Well, we won't have covered everything, but we've covered, I think, the main things. Are there anything else that you want to mention? I see you've written Cheetos down.
I haven't heard that word in a while.
I don't even know if they're a thing anymore.
So anyway, hope you enjoyed this episode of Chats with Ben. If there's anything, tell us if anything in particular stood out to you, because we've just talked for an hour or so, an hour and 20 minutes about just our kind of normal life and working together. But if there's any part of it where you're like, oh my God, that's game changing, we're going to do that, or something that you already do, maybe, we would honestly love to hear what resonated, what didn't, and especially if you are thinking about starting the journey of working with your partner as well, that would be really cool to know more about it.
Yeah, and if we've missed anything out, if you've got this kind of problem that seems insurmountable, it'd be really good. We won't have covered everything. So if there are other areas of our kind of working relationship that you're like, oh, it'd be really interesting to hear about this thing, leave a comment, and we'll cover it in a future video. But thanks for being with us, and we'll catch you in the next one.
That was the second episode of Chats with Ben, where we covered what's it like working with your partner. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a like. Definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. At the moment, we're doing 1 or 2 of these a week, and we cannot wait to see you in the next one.